Okay, so you're about to start a new project. You've got that blank canvas, all the possibilities in the world, and then that one huge question hits you. SvelteKit or Next.js? Right now, it feels like the debate in the front-end world. And honestly, the choice you make here is going to shape your entire experience from start to finish.
But here's the thing. This goes way deeper than just how the code looks. It's really about a fundamental philosophy. When does the hard work actually happen? You see, does your framework act like a meticulous chef who preps everything perfectly in the kitchen before a single customer walks in? Or is it more like a short order cook, assembling everything on the fly, right in front of you? That's the core difference we're going to unpack.
And here's our game plan. We're going to start with that core philosophical divide, the real why behind it all. Then, we'll see how that why impacts what your users actually feel when we talk performance. After that, we'll switch gears and look at what you feel as a developer. We'll explore the real-world ecosystem, and finally, we'll put it all together to help you make that big decision. Okay, let's dive into section 1, the core philosophical divide. And I'm not kidding, if you can really get your head around this one concept, everything else we talk about today, every other difference between these two frameworks is just going to click into place. It all comes down to the why behind the code. So first up, we've got SvelteKit, and Svelte is what we call a compile time framework. What in the world does that mean? It means Svelte does almost all of its magic during the build step, before your code ever even sees the light of day. It takes your nice, clean Svelte components and literally compiles them down into super optimized, plain old JavaScript. The browser isn't running Svelte, it's just running JavaScript, the language it was born to speak. That's the promise. Now, on the other hand, you have Next.js, which is built on top of React, a runtime library. This means it actually has to ship the React library itself over to your user's browser. And once it gets there, that library wakes up, interprets your code, and uses something called the virtual DOM to figure out what needs to change on the screen. Think of it like a blueprint of your UI that it keeps in memory. It compares that blueprint to any new changes and then efficiently updates only the real page. It's a really smart system for sure, but it means there's always this extra layer running in the browser. So let's bring back our chef analogy. SvelteKit is the chef who does all the prep work, all the chopping, the mixing, the marinating, before the restaurant even opens. When an order comes in, it's just a quick, clean assembly. Next.js is the chef who starts cooking from scratch the moment the order hits the kitchen. One does the work up front, the other does it just in time. So, we've got the prep-ahead chef versus the just-in-time cook. How does that choice actually affect the final meal? Well, that brings us right to section 2, performance and the user. Because that philosophical difference has a very real, very tangible impact on just how fast your website feels. And wow, does this first number tell a story? A basic Hello World app in SvelteKit, the simplest page you can possibly make, can weigh in at just 2.9 kilobytes. That is tiny. That's smaller than the logo on a lot of websites. It's the direct result of that compile time approach. You only ship the code you absolutely, positively need. Now, let's look at the same Hello World app in Next.js. It comes in at around 131.3 kilobytes zipped. And just to put that into perspective, that is over 45 times larger right out of the box. And why? Because you have to ship that whole React and Next.js runtime, even if your page just says hello. But, okay, it's not always quite that simple. As your app gets bigger, the story gets a little more nuanced. This table shows something pretty fascinating. SvelteKit starts way smaller, but its bundle grows a little faster compared to your source code. Next.js starts much bigger, but since the framework is already there, adding new components is actually more efficient. So in theory, there's this inflection point, maybe around 120 kilobytes of your code, where Next.js starts to win. But, and this is a big but, in the real world with code splitting and other modern techniques, you might never actually hit that point in a single page load. Okay, that covers performance for the user, but what about us? What about the developers in the trenches? What does it actually feel like to sit down and write code in these things every day? Let's jump into section 3, the developer experience. This quote from a developer on Reddit just nails a feeling that so many people share. Because Svelte is a compiler that just enhances HTML, writing Svelte often feels like you're, just writing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It leans on the web standards you already know, and that makes it feel incredibly natural. It's less about learning a framework's weird quirks and more about just building on the web itself. And hey, that's not just a feeling. The data absolutely backs it up. The State of JS 2022 survey showed Svelte with a staggering 90% retention rate. That means 9 out of 10 devs who try it want to use it again. Now, React is still incredibly high at 83%, which is great, but Svelte clearly has something special going on when it comes to pure developer happiness. And a huge piece of that developer happiness is state management. Handling all the data that changes in your app. SvelteKit has these beautiful built-in solutions like stores and the new rune system. With Next.js and React, you get the basic building blocks like useState and useContext, but for anything even slightly complex, you're probably going to be reaching for a third-party library like ZooStand or Redux. Svelte's approach just feels way more integrated and has a lot less boilerplate. And all of this kind of leads to the learning curve. With SvelteKit, it's a gentle ramp. You start with what you know, HTML, CSS, JS, and you just gradually add in Svelte's features. To really get going with Next.js, it can feel more like a steep cliff. First, you need a really solid understanding of React with its hooks and component model, and then you have to learn all the Next.js specific stuff on top of that. All right, so SvelteKit seems to have an edge on performance and developer experience. But let's be real, building an app is so much more than just writing code. That brings us to Section 4, ecosystem and the real world. This is where the practical, day-to-day trade-offs really start to matter.
And this is where Next.js lands a massive punch. Because it's built on React, it instantly plugs into a huge, mature, and completely battle-tested ecosystem. You need an enterprise-grade library like MUI? It's there. You want something modern and composable like Showdown UI? No problem. The options are just endless, and these tools can save you literally thousands of hours.
Now, that's not to say SvelteKit's ecosystem is a ghost town. Not at all. It's vibrant, it's passionate, and it's growing like crazy. You got fantastic options like Skeleton UI, Flow by Svelte, and even a really popular unofficial version of Showdown. But it is, without a doubt, younger and smaller than React's. You're basically trading that established maturity for exciting new momentum. And we see this exact same pattern with other crucial things, like authentication. In the Next.js world, auth.js is pretty much the de facto standard. It's mature, it's reliable, it just works. In SvelteKit, the ecosystem is still kind of solidifying. Auth.js does have support, but you also have other great choices like Lucia. It just means you might have to do a little more digging and a bit more setup yourself. Okay, we've laid it all out. The philosophy, the performance, the developer experience, and the ecosystem. Now for the grand finale. Let's bring it all together in Section 5, making your choice. So, who should be picking SvelteKit? Well, you should go with SvelteKit if your #1 priority is blazing fast performance and the smallest bundles possible. If you are craving a simpler syntax that feels closer to the web with less boilerplate and an easier learning curve, SvelteKit is going to feel like a breath of fresh air. And its portability is a huge win if you don't want to be locked into one specific hosting company. And when is Next.js the right move? You should probably choose Next.js if your project absolutely depends on having access to that massive React ecosystem of libraries and, frankly, developers to hire. If you're building a huge enterprise-scale app and you need the confidence of a framework that's been battle-tested by the biggest companies on the planet, well, Next.js is the industry standard for a reason. I think this quote is the perfect summary, especially since it's from a developer who works at Vercel but also helps maintain SvelteKit. They're both great. Right now, Next.js has the practical advantage, especially for staffing a team, but the underlying quality and joy of developing with SvelteKit is so good that its growth just feels inevitable. It's the established champion versus the brilliant up-and-comer. And that leaves us with the final question, the one you have to answer for yourself and for your next project. As the web platform itself just keeps getting more and more powerful, what do you value more? Does it make more sense to start lean, fast, and simple with a compiler that embraces the platform? Or is it smarter to leverage the power, the stability, and the massive ecosystem of a giant? The choice is yours.